Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. As you can tell, I just had a little cough, so not a little under the weather today, but feeling fine enough to do this, and I wouldn't skip an opportunity to jump on a podcast. If you know me, you know that's probably a very true statement. Of course, I've got with me Jairo Cox. Jairo, how's it going?
Doing well, Andy. Hope you get to feeling better real soon.
Considering what's going on in the world, I don't feel that bad. It's like we were just joking about previous to jumping on the call here. It's February in North Carolina. I just went skiing out west. I'm probably supposed to have a cold at this point. It could be a lot worse.
Got some sniffles. Comes with the territory. Yep.
As we were joking about, I did go get a test, and it came back negative. So that was quite the celebration in our households. But I have been quarantined to a condominium for the next 5 days without my wife and kids, and don't tell anybody, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, I mean, nothing but DoorDash and work. I mean, I can guess how that's going to play out.
Grubhub.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, and we have with us the magical Harvey Green. I don't know why I came up with magical just now for you, but that's your new nickname, Magical Harvey.
Nice.
Harvey is a sales engineer at XenTegra and a very knowledgeable Nutanix resource. I like to say I taught him everything he knows, but I think he got past me after the first month or two.
You're a very good teacher.
I'm an excellent teacher. Probably a bad consultant, but a good teacher. You guys know from your college or high school days that a lot of people can talk it but not do it. I can talk it and I can do it to about level 1.5, and then all of a sudden I got to phone a friend.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right. So today's topic is a blog or an article written about Nutanix, specifically around the healthcare application of Epic. Epic is a EMR. That's close.
You were close.
And you guys, when I first started working with Nutanix and in healthcare, I got a lot of pushback around the Acropolis operating system, the storage piece, as well as the Acropolis hypervisor. And at some point, Epic agreed to support that. And now it sounds like Epic is a huge fan of Epic-related workloads, specifically in the Citrix or VMware world. With it being hosted on the Acropolis operating system / Acropolis hypervisor, and we're going to talk to Jirai about that and figure out where all that's gone, and that's the topic for today. Anything we want to add to that before we jump into the content, guys?
Nope.
It's a good podcast to me.
So the blog we're referring to is titled "The Top 10 Reasons to Run Epic on Nutanix." And when I say that, are we talking about for Citrix or EUC workloads? Or are we talking about Epic backend? And what are we really covering there?
I think it's both, really. And over our journey, it started with the EUC portion of it, and then grew to include the back office portion as well, right? The actual EMR databases.
And Jairo, what was the concern? What was the concern on the EUC side? Is there some high data I/O need? Is there some redundant? What caused the original concern from an EUC perspective, or was it just lack of knowledge?
I think it probably mirrors a lot of our journey in even just the enterprise space, right? VDI first, and then stuff like Oracle, stuff like HANA, stuff like SQL came second, right? As we think about how we started out 10, almost 11 years ago now, right? When we would you'd look at nodes that might have had maybe dual SSDs that reach 100 gig each, like that, because SSDs were crazy expensive back then, right? So as the price of flash comes down, what we can do within a certain node, right? Because we don't do an architecture that uses stuff like disk shelves, grows, and so we can tackle more and more workloads.
Well, let's go back for some of our younger listeners who might not know the history of all this. There was a time back in early 2000s where we're talking about virtualization, specifically on the VMware side, and we're having to talk to application vendors about how this is the future and how stable and reliable this is, and they're just flat out saying, nope, never going to happen. You're never going to virtualize my workload. Jairo, are you old enough to experience that?
I caught the tail end of that. My very first job, we were kicking around like, what is this ESX thing? And it was back with like the service console and 2.5, 3.5, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I was on the help
that
desk,
was
so
one
I
of
was
those where
adjacent to all that.
I would talk to the application vendor and I'd be like, okay, I'll call you back in 3 months, see if your story changed. And of course it did, right? At some
Oh,
point
yeah.
it became you better support this. If not, you're going to be not only a legacy app, you're going to be a legacy business if you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Harvey, are you old enough to remember those days?
I am.
I knew you were.
Don't remind me.
It the right way. A man of a certain age.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any firsthand examples of an application vendor that told you that virtualization would never happen? Oh, I have a story to tell, but go ahead. Do you have any application specific ones?
I can't think of one application specific because there were just a lot of them. Back then, every application had gotten to the point, the main ones, they had gotten to the point where they felt like they all deserved their own server and their own hardware, and that was the only way that they were going to support it.
Oh, yeah. So much of it was driven by just server minimums went up, right? When you couldn't get less than 8 cores or dual 8 cores, it's like my domain controller does not need all that. How do I buy less? So then you had to start.
Is it me or was it Oracle that decided that they needed their own hypervisor platform and would only support themselves on themselves? Did I dream that, or was that part of the story and all that?
I have so far had a very successful career, I think, staying as far away from Oracle licensing as I possibly can. I try to change that as little as possible. It sounds like a very Oracle thing to do, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I think they had to give up on that one at some point. So let me just finish this by telling a quick story. I guess 2004 timeframe. I was working at Microsoft as a contractor, and I got an interview with one of the healthcare systems here in the Carolinas, big one. And I number one, the guy was formerly with the Carolina Panthers IT department, and they had just done a documentary, 60 Minutes had just done a story on him the night before. And I walk in, and he's the guy interviewing me for the job at the healthcare system. I'm like, holy cow. So I had a great conversation with him, talked about all that, perfect connection. And then I spent probably the next 30 minutes or so talking about VMware and how virtualization of the hardware was the future of all this. And I walked out there thinking, yeah, they're going to hire me tomorrow, and they're going to pay me top dollar. It's going to be great. And then I never got a call back. And then about 6 months later, one of the other guys that was in an interview called and on the spot offered me a job. Like, what in the world? I mean, you guys turned me down before, and now you're calling, you said, hello, would you like to work for us? I get it. Okay, what happened? Turns out that was one of those guys that did not believe virtual machine virtualizing hardware was ever going to go anywhere. And when I started praising the concept of it, he wrote me off right that minute. Not sure where that guy's at now, but I'm assuming that if he stayed in IT, he's changed his tune somewhere along the way.
It it was one of the earliest times of so in the class I first sat in to go for my VCP at the time, the instructor said, virtualization big sounds like a buzzword at the time, right? 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but it's really a software-defined server, right? Which is not like a rocket science level way to describe it, but like when it's powered off, the VM is a text file, right? And so that really sort of helped me parse it as software-defined computing, right? Software-defined server, and it's just one of the for most people, one of the first places they saw software start to eat the world, right? Software can literally do everything, including routing and switching these days, right? It can do encryption, all these kind of things that used to need specific offloads or specific hardware, and now it's just let me update that in software.
Right.
So Jairo, do we need to tackle this discussion from an EUC perspective, from a Epic backend perspective, or all the above, and all these things we're going to talk about apply?
I think they both apply, right? Because we've had the Epic EUC space for longer, right? As we've had EUC, of course, basically forever, and then stuff like the cache and running the actual Epic core has come along after that. Same as we've added other tier 1 applications to the portfolio. So yeah, and
So let me say this: if you've never experienced hyperconvergence, specifically Nutanix, it is that moment similar to when you first got your first SSD drive in your PC. That just, you didn't change anything. You still have the same policies, same group policies, same login, everything. But it got infinitely faster. Not infinitely, it got multiple times faster, just because the I/O constraint just more or less went away, right?
Yeah, for sure. Right. I mean, reducing that sort of latency of how do I get my data, can have a very meaningful effect on, users, but really the full stack,
Right. All right. So, Harvey, you want to do a drum roll and we'll jump into number one?
All right.
Holy cow. I was not expecting that. That's good.
Well, I did it to see how well it'll play later when I listen to this and laugh.
He's magic. We established this. He's magic.
You got Chevy Chase beat.
I used to be a drummer, so I take the drum roll literally.
Oh, no doubt. All right, so we'll go with number one here. Jairo, I'm not sure if these are in order of priority or not, but number one is comfort. And it says Nutanix customers are fully eligible for Epic Honor Roll and on-target platform incentives. I think I know what that means, but why don't you describe it to us?
So my understanding, Epic, when you interview them, they're interviewing you too, right? So like they want to make sure that you're going to run their software in a way that is, mutually successful for both of you. And so being on that honor roll is a way of, providing extra validation that this is going to be a good experience for everybody involved.
And that's a good way to talk about Epic a little bit. I mean, Epic is so predominant in the healthcare space. They kind of get to tell you whether you're going to run their software and how you're going to run it. That's a little unique, but that also makes the fact that Nutanix has checked those boxes even more valuable.
We can relate to that. I mean, even we as a company, sure, we've got a hardware, not even an HCL, it's an HFCL. We even specify the firmware. It's not bring your own server. It's bring what we've tested, which is a very wide portfolio. Bring what we've tested, and we know you're going to be successful on.
Yeah, right. So I'll add to that too. I actually had not done any work around the Epic Honor Roll program. Apparently, they also have a good maintenance program. That's a grant program that if you continue to meet the objectives that they lay out, then they also will give you a grant to help pay for some of the hardware you're running on, which I think is great. I had not known anything about that before today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's in our culture, right? That even Nutanix, we love customer delight. We love simplicity. We love, ease of support, right? When you talk to support, that should be a great experience. But this is almost putting dollars behind what's the value of a better support experience, or what do you need less often.
Which is a great mindset. I'll tell another quick story that somewhat relates. I was on a call with a customer and an engineer today. And the engineer started telling the customer about free software to do X, Y, and Z. And look, I'm not trying to sell the customer the product. That's not the point. But the point was this somewhat capable product was introduced to a customer for free, and that customer will run with anything possible. My point in all that is something that's simple and manageable and supportable is sometimes better than free.
Oh, sure. Well, some software you pay with things other than dollars, right? Sometimes you pay with your time. You pay with your weekends.
Yeah. I think one of the main out of that is supportable. A lot of times with free, you end up with no support. It's kind of figure it out. So. Yeah.
You saved yourself a lot of money. Not really. Okay. Number two, full stack capability. Nutanix has full stack capability, including IRIS, cache, Clarity Reporting Suite, Hyperspace, and web services with successful customer adoption. Probably exactly what it says, right?
Pretty much. I mean, it just speaks to that whole evolution of moving from EUC to running even the core and like the cache database. It's like that's the most IO demanding part of the stack. So. We're up to the task and have customers that can testify about that.
Is it fair to say that Epic is IO intensive, or is it big writes? Is it common writes? Is it a lot of writes? What makes it a concerning workload, or is it all just myth that it's all that difficult?
That's a great question. I don't know the exact details of the write pattern. It is a ton of IOPS. I definitely have seen those in the past in some past engagements where it's been, in the multiple hundreds of thousands of IOPS for sure. But I think it's also Epic's validation, right? That they'll test the stack and tell the customer this is going to, perform well for you, right? So it's got to pass everyone's sniff test.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you guys know the story, but the way I understand it is Epic was created by a nurse that just thought that the software they were using was just completely horrible and didn't do what it needed to do. If I remember correctly, it was a nurse that realized that and got somebody involved on the development side. But maybe somebody can let us know if that's not the case.
I mean,
All about user experience.
That's a rule on the internet, right? If you don't know the answer, you just say something wrong and wait to get corrected.
Well, maybe Harvey can Google that for us while we're doing this. All right, number 3 says breadth of experience. I always have to enunciate that at the end because I'm Southern and it just doesn't come out naturally. Breadth of experience. Epic customers have been using Nutanix since 2014 with more than 50 years of cumulative runtime.
Pretty self-explanatory, but yeah, not the newest kid on the block.
Yeah, proven. Like you're not bleeding edge, you're not cutting edge. You're pretty much normal if you're trying to do these things.
Sometimes, sometimes boring can be a great attribute to have when you're running, business critical apps.
You should strive for boring. You really should. The least change possible. And Harvey knows that's a big thing for me. When I see people implementing solutions that they didn't need in the first place, it's mind-boggling for me.
Right.
That's interesting, right? Because like right now, virtually every IT department that stays closer to where they really need to be, right? If you think about who's going to survive in the next 10 years, it's the ones that teach themselves the most to manage change the best and knock out change the fastest, right? And increase their agility and move at a faster clip. And you hurt yourself twice if you're putting in the wrong changes, right? Because you're not only wasting time, but you're probably learning how to do bad changes.
Right. Yeah, you need to do enough to keep your job security, but not do so much that you create additional work for yourself and for the business and cost and complexity. As you guys know, XenTegra focuses on the end-user compute space a lot around Citrix, and there's a ton of tools in the Citrix suite that can be used but shouldn't be used unless you can justify why you're using them.
Right.
Yeah, everything's got to have solid requirements for sure. Well, I'm listening to this podcast about the some of the recent hacks, right, that have gone on in the software world that even involved getting bad actors into stuff like the build processes. It's like if you're running an Agile shop and you're writing code for a living, I'll bet you trust that your build process is. I'm no expert here, right? These way smarter folks than me, talking about this. I'll bet you trust that your build process is kind of set in stone, right? Code goes in one side, compiled stuff comes out the other. What if you even needed an Agile process to set up a new code pipeline because the old one got infected and you can't trust anything, right? Like fully implementing zero trust and being able to respond to that is like a whole nother level of, everything as code and how quickly can you adapt to new situations.
I think if the average user knew how many ones and zeros went into everything they did and how much chance for human error or malicious activity was in there, I think they would just watch TV all day.
Okay, super quick sidebar. I love video games, and speed runs are a thing where it's like, how fast can you beat this level, right? Set a new world record for this level or this game to this point of completion. And there was a speed run that was affected by I kid you not, a solar flare that flipped a bit inside of a cartridge and allowed, I think it was a variable that controlled like the character jump. He was able to beat a record faster than ever in a not virtually unreproducible way until they put it in a lab and constructed the same bit flip at the same time. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, all right. Number 4, it says Epic ecosystem partnership. Nutanix and Epic maintain a close working relationship, including testing, sizing, and customer success. Again, probably exactly what it says there, but there's real validity in companies communicating and partnering for sure.
Yeah, like we do for everything. Customers want a handshaking relationship between their vendors, not a finger pointing relationship between their vendors.
Yeah, mutually beneficial and open communication is just extremely important, almost in everything in life, but certainly in business. Harvey, you had a comment?
No, I mean, I think Jaira said it best. A handshaking relationship instead of a finger pointing relationship. I mean, that's exactly what you want as a customer from organizations that you're dealing with, especially when one organization makes one thing and another organization makes the other thing. If they are already, together and they have that partnership, that relationship, it is much more advantageous for you to go down that route than to go down, something else that you're putting two pieces together that don't know about each other. I think, Andy, you spent the better part of your career putting two pieces together that don't know about each other or don't talk to each other for customers.
Let's talk about three pieces. So this next topic is around total cost of ownership versus a three-tier architecture. It claims 60% lower ownership, which I'm sure there's ways to justify. There's a footnote we can probably go look at. But here's the thing. In the Nutanix world, if you can run Nutanix Acropolis hypervisor or operating system on top of the hypervisor, and you truly get storage, compute, maybe even buy the Nutanix gear that comes with it. Sorry, guys, I may have lost you for a second there. If you can buy the Nutanix gear that comes with it, you've really lowered the variables, and now you've got one place to call and get support and know that that support's available to you, as well as, number 5 here, lowered your total cost of ownership.
Well, especially like we said before, when you value your time, right? So, stuff like one of the metrics that rolls into that larger metric often is like 98% reduction in unplanned downtime, right? When the system is better at self-healing and more resilient. Today we're talking about an industry that has a very, very hard cost of downtime. So that's all very meaningful.
I'm having flashbacks to a large healthcare organization that, Jaira, I bet if I mentioned them to you, you could tell me where they stand with all this. But a couple of years ago, they were just adamant they were going to buy Dell servers and run Hyper-V. And I'm sitting here going, oh, my goodness. I will almost guarantee you that they're probably on Nutanix today. I don't think we helped them implement it, but I'm sure at some point they came to their senses.
Hyper-V is it's playing on hard mode. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's going to live on in Azure, but that's about the only place. Yep. And I don't even know what real version of that it is. It's probably very customized. All right, number 6 here, we're talking about performance. I go back to the comment I made earlier. It's like when you finally got an SSD drive in your laptop for the first time and you hit the button and 3 seconds later it turned on. That plus optimization of the software, which Nutanix is a software-centric solution. You don't need the entire boot process anymore to get a login screen. Therefore, you conceptually think it's faster. That's what you're getting in a simplified Nutanix implementation that Epic can benefit from.
Well, and this is probably a good place to interject about sort of when it's a great technology for both the EUC side and for like the core side. Well, now you can cross-pollinate, right? Now you can make one larger team out of what used to be 2 siloed teams. Maybe you can cross-train. You can have more people who can you call at 10 in the morning when you have a question about how this thing works.
Now, I will stop and use that moment to point out that in my world, I prefer that the EUC, aka Citrix VMware side of a Nutanix cluster is separate from the infrastructure side, where you might be doing all these other Epic things and beyond. And that's not necessarily because of the software, it's because your buying patterns and your needs may be different. And it might be that the group administering one end or the other or both might be different. So it might just come down to politics and who owns which piece. I have a standing every other week Nutanix call with one of my clients, and it's interesting to hear them talk about the infrastructure guy and the Citrix guy have dialogue in front of the rest of us, and it's clear that it's beneficial for them to separate who owns what piece of the story, including the platform that the VDAs run on.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't advocate mixing databases and like end users together. For one reason, because they have very different requirements for CPU, right? Like end users were going to be into, how many cores can I get? 24, 30 core kind of boxes often to get the right kind of density. And they want some clock speed, but they don't need all of the clock speed. Databases is like, how few cores can I buy? And I want every bit of clock speed I can possibly justify. And also, by the way, I'm usually, for some flavors, paying through the nose per core for that database licensing. So I want as few as possible with as much performance per core. It's almost the opposite of VDI in a lot of ways. So fully agree you wouldn't mix those, but I can have one team that knows how to run both, right? Compared to having my VDI infrastructure architects and my database infrastructure architects.
Well, the skill set transverses both sides. But what's so nice about the Nutanix is because of the simplicity, which is number 7, I can literally take a Citrix admin and teach a Nutanix in a couple hours to the degree that he can get around most of it. And then if he needs help, he can pick up the phone and call his other team or call Nutanix support. That's how I got Harvey ramped up so quick. I take credit for a lot of stuff. Hey, before I forget, if anybody's complaining about the audio, I had a little audio issue before I jumped on this, so I apologize about that if I sound a little off today. Performance, I don't think we've covered this, but well, maybe so. I think maybe we did. I'm just having a blank here, but performance and then simplicity is number 7. Both just mainstream Nutanix concepts that just apply to the Epic world as much, if not more, than other places.
Yeah, I mean that the ease of use, the scalability, the if you need 8 nodes to start with, and then in a year you need 2 more nodes, growing that to a 10 node cluster is just a non-issue, right? Pop them in the rack, expand the cluster. Data spreads over, VM spread over, build more stuff, use more, buy only when you need it. The simplicity of everything, right? Simplicity of running it day to day, but also simplicity of knowing when do I need to expand it? How full is it? Can I tolerate the loss of a whatever, right? A disk, a node, even a chassis, right? If your cluster grows big enough.
Yeah. Right. Okay, number 8 talks about clinical outcomes, fast and consistent user experience, increased productivity. I guess healthcare, like everything else, but maybe more importantly, is something that you want consistent and fast results, and having a platform that is simplified but yet high performance at the same time is probably a good platform in healthcare for this reason of successful, repeatable results.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the healthcare field, the system should be all about getting information back and forth to the personnel that's working there, because, they can't remember all of these things. So they have, this is why they have the medical record systems and why they have this technology. And really what you want is for the technology to provide them a way to get to the information so that they can get back to the patient or be treating the patient, and not spend so much time worrying about, how the systems are running and things like that. You want it to be, the best setup for them, so that, the last thing they're thinking about is how quickly or how slowly systems are running, or how, what their user experience is on those things. You want them to be concentrating on the patient.
Right. Yeah, you want the infrastructure layer to be completely invisible to them. Go ahead, Jarvis.
Well, it's just so easy, right? We're all technologists, right? So we just inherently sort of love things that are faster on their own merits, right? And it's such a great reminder that when it comes to a business solution, nothing needs to be faster on its own or for its own sake. It needs to be faster to drive an outcome, right? And so, I mean, patient care is such a direct input-output correlation of, I've got to do this faster so I can help that person sooner and the next person, or take less time per customer, right, to get them helped. Yeah, it can be very easy to draw that kind of value prop out of the solution.
Yeah, I love to use my brother as an example there. He's a racing guy. He was always into fast cars and large horsepower, and he had a flip phone forever, and finally got a smartphone. But about 2 years ago, he bought a Tesla, which seems totally counterproductive, but he hated technology, dislikes technology. But the fact that the software-defined Tesla and the way the mechanics of a Tesla works, he got both the smartness and the increased speed and performance all at the same time, and the gearhead turned into an electric car overnight.
Yeah, I think it was it the California wildfires last year that they pushed an over-the-air update, right? Because normally you're only allowed to drive like the top 90% of the battery, and they said if you're evacuating right now, and they can know where you are, geolocate the car. If the car is in these certain areas, it's allowed to use the last 10% of its battery so that you can go farther without having to recharge.
Yep.
Wow.
They also opened up the supercharging for that too, that people would normally have to pay for. It just made it free for them so that they
Yeah, I mean that's what a Tesla driver gets to experience today, and that's retail point of sale, of tomorrow, right? Of computer driven pricing with full control of variability end to end. to respond to demands. I mean, it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. All right. Number 9 here says outstanding support. And when we're talking about technical support here, talking about the Net Promoter Score, that which Nutanix is really bold on. It's enlightening to see a company kind of like XenTegra that was built to be very pleasing, kind of a servant's type of heart while still building a financially successful business. It's certainly part of the Nutanix story is to not throw in support, but to actually use it as a value add.
Yep, that's absolutely it. And for those out there hearing this and saying, "Oh, well, I've never heard of a Net Promoter Score," or "I don't need that," I would just challenge you to look into the relationships you have, the different vendors you use, and just take a look at their Net Promoter Score. And that you know what your experience is with them. You know what your experience is with support and things of that nature. Just I would encourage you to take a look at that and, kind of jive that with what they have as a Net Promoter Score. And you possibly have some things that you might just be missing. So I would just say, give that a look and, be able to appreciate what that means.
Part of that for me is philosophical. Look, there's a lot of companies out there that got started and then they realized that their support grading system was causing them to lose or hurt their business, and so they adjusted. What I find exciting about Nutanix when it comes to this area is that they seem to understand this from day one, so they haven't really had to recover from a low mark, which it's harder to come out of. It's hard to end up with an A if you start your first exam off with a 72. I got kids getting ready to go off to college, trying to embark that, and it's a hard uphill climb out of a 72. Nutanix seems to, from day one, understood that you can't start low; you got to start high and maintain it.
Yep.
Yeah. It's something that doesn't just happen, right? We're humbly very proud about maintaining our support track record as the company has 10x over the lifespan. It doesn't just happen, right? It takes a lot of care and forethought. Find David Sangster on Twitter, out on LinkedIn. He'll tell you what it takes to care about customers deeply.
All right, guys. Number 10, Harvey, drum roll, please. Like David Letterman.
I think it's Jairus' turn.
Let me find a recording of a drum roll to play real fast because it'll sound better, I guarantee.
I can't even beat the table in rhythm. Make a drum roll. Okay, number 10, and this is really important. I really had this conversation earlier today, and that is the ability to take this software-defined compute infrastructure that we've been talking about all the time and have that portable or hostable in a cloud of some type. In this case, we're talking about a public cloud, and maybe specifically talking about Xi clusters, Nutanix Xi clusters on Amazon for now, or AWS, and then eventually Azure as well. This is where you're running Nutanix clusters maintained by Nutanix in some type of public cloud data center, and having that elastic or portable solution underneath your Epic environment is and will have major benefits for people down the road.
Absolutely. This has become a pretty hot topic of late, honestly, with a bunch of my customers. We've been having a lot of conversations around it. One of the ideas, and we kind of discussed it earlier too, one of the ideas around, Nutanix is the simplicity and the ability to manage everything out of one console. Once you get used to that, and get used to having that experience, to be able to actually translate that to being able to manage it the same way when it's in a public cloud, it's a game changer. You've got AWS, you've got Azure, you've got GCP that are the main public cloud players out there. All of them have a different interface. All of them have different rules, and all of them have a ramp up period where you're going to have to, figure some things out that you might not know to start with. And that's how it is using any new system. But the ability to have these skills be able to transfer over, and you can be up and running, and how to do what you need to do, like that's a game changer for a lot of people.
So you're saying I don't need that Azure for Dummies book I've been reading?
Maybe just the first chapter or two, so you at least know what's going on in the background.
Hey, Guy, any comments on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, just as we all watch software eat the world, and we all play a key part in software eating the world, right? Like software has to run somewhere, and I think it's super exciting, right, about this new capability for cloud to provide really hardware, which really becomes almost data center on demand.
Right.
And I think for you guys, especially in the EUC space, is crazy awesome because, well, Harvey heard me say this today. Like traditionally, right? Like if you told somebody your home insurance policy is you buy a second home and just hope you never have to go move into it when your first one burns down, you'd be crazy, right? I mean, that's been the traditional enterprise IT method of DR for forever, right? Whereas cloud-based DR, EUC is a great workload for it, where I can keep a couple of nodes running all the time, replicate up there, but when I want to fail up there, fail over to it, I grab some more nodes on demand, provision them, scale out, run in the cloud, then fail back, scale my cloud footprint back down. It's much more akin to like a traditional price of home versus homeowners policy kind of pricing, not go buy two homes.
Right.
I got to tell you guys the story. And I may have told it before, and I'm apologizing.
Oh no! Did your home burn down? I'm sorry.
No. I worked for a Fortune 500 company here in Charlotte. They sent me to Atlanta to whatever that big place down is there to do a data center recovery exercise. The servers they gave me were over a decade old and wouldn't begin to handle our workload. This was 6 years after Hurricane Katrina. There were still people walking around in their bathrobes, living there from Hurricane Katrina. It was just such an eye-opening experience to see what the real world looks like. And then I went back, and I think we were paying like $8,000 a month or something for the service. It was insane. And, that was my moment to think, hey, there's got to be a different way to do this.
Yeah, agreed. I've had a few conversations just over the past week with some customers who are also, paying. They're making a huge investment in technology for a DR data center or a DR setup. And I said, okay, well, you're looking for a new solution, and they wanted to have public cloud be a part of that solution. And I was like, this is great. Let's make sure that we, get the right requirements, the right scope in place. I said, well, for your DR, how often are you testing it? So, I want to make sure that we've got everything in place. Are you doing this monthly? Are you doing it every 6 months? Do you, roll to DR for 6 months, roll back? And they say, oh, well, no, we just build out DR and we hope we never use it. And that's great. Like, I'm glad that you're making the investment in DR, but you do at least need to test it to make sure that it's working. Do you plan to change that at all? And no, I've been here for, forever. We've always had DR. We've never tested it. Please test your DR, people. The first time you need it and it's not there, it's not really DR. And the next question that you will get is, why have we been spending all this money?
Yeah.
If the word hope is in your plan, you got a problem.
Yeah. This would be a good episode. We should capture that for a later episode of just like, common pitfalls of DR. And like, usually it's like failure of imagination, right? Like, oh, we never thought we'd fail in that particular way.
Right. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate it. We've reached the end of this one. Jaira, any additional topics or comments you'd like to add to what we've covered here?
I think we've covered this one pretty well. I should have looked up what next week's is to tease that topic.
Yeah, I don't know what it is either, but I'm sure people just can't wait to hear it. I'll just highlight that everything we've talked about here as it relates to Epic, that translates to every other application workload that you might be considering. There was a point in time where some people would lay traps for Nutanix and get people convinced that certain workloads wouldn't work on Nutanix, but those days are long gone. And then you add the elasticity of the Xi cloud clusters. Now all of a sudden you've got a real solution that has lots of availability to go different directions as needed. It truly has come full circle to the point where this is the way, not an alternative way.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, we're not scared of any workloads. We've got, give your reference architectures for all of them, actually, right? Like high performance, high capacity, archive tier, EUC, server vert. We can do all of that, right? Within the benefit is one common way to manage all of those, applications or workloads in your data center.
Yep. Well, enough. If I take off my Citrix hat for a minute and put on my EUC hat, throw in Frame into that, now you got something that is really elastic without the need for the customer to really have to do much of anything as we move from physical data center to cloud-based data center. And Frame's not going to care.
Right.
Doesn't care.
So,
all right. Well, Harvey, anything else?
Yeah, I'll do the tea. For those of you who listen today and want to know more and want to work with it, be able to see that single pane of glass type management. We've got another Nutanix bootcamp coming up on the 12th, and you'll be able to jump in and do some labs and learn a lot more with me and my counterpart, Merritt, at Nutanix. So feel free to go to events.XenTegra.com and sign up for it.
So Harvey, are you seeing people show up for the class that are listening to our podcast, or not yet?
I'm actually going to ask that question on Friday. I have not asked that question. But it'll be good to see what kind of crossover effect we're having.
Well, my hope is that there are a lot of people that are not listening, but eventually find us and are able to go back and listen to the old episodes and just use the compilation of what we've covered in these podcasts as a value-added learning tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with the 2020 normalization of doing everything remotely, right? You can get somebody who pops on a workshop from anywhere.
Yeah. I think that's actually hurting the podcast business, though, because I don't think, I used to listen to podcasts on an airplane or on a subway, and now I'm not getting nearly as many I put a podcast in at night sometimes to go to sleep, and I make it about 5 minutes, and then I'm out.
Yeah, we all have no commute now.
But I have to guess that there's nobody on the planet that listens to us, especially with my horrible voice, to go to sleep at night. But hey, if there is, who knows?
Everyone has trouble sleeping now and then. So.
All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot, and I appreciate you joining. We'll do it again next week.
All right. Sounds good.
Talk to y'all.